Stress is something that everybody will experience to some extent at some point in their lives. But what exactly is stress and how can we best combat our level of stress? Well, on this week's episode of GetPsyched, we're going to be looking at stress, what stress is, and my top 3 tips on how best to combat your level of stress. What's up guys, welcome to this week's episode of Get Psyched, and like I said, this week we're going to be looking at the psychology of stress. We're going to be looking at a little bit of what stress actually is, what it can do to us, and my top 3 tips on how best to combat your levels of stress. So let's kick off by looking at a little bit as to what exactly stress is. Stress fundamentally is when we experience a change or a difficult or new challenging situations in our lives. Now, when we initially experience stress, our hypothalamus, which is the fundamental main area for stress in our brain, kicks in. It fundamentally sends signals to the pituitary gland and the adrenal medulla in our brains. After this, the adrenal cortex kicks in and sends hormones such as cortisol into our bloodstream that releases levels of glucose. And what this fundamentally does is that glucose is used to expend high levels of energy in a very rapid amount of time. So when you experience stress, all these hormones and all these neurological factors are kicking in to release certain amounts of hormones that are going to enable you to react quickly and in the most appropriate way when you feel stressed. And when these hormones are released into the bloodstream, our fight, flight, and freeze functionalities kick in. Now, this is something that you've probably heard before, and it's fundamentally these 3 concepts: fight, flight, and freeze are the options that we have when we feel stressed. Now, basically, stress is a call to action in the brain. It fundamentally means that we have enough resources, enough neurological awareness to know that what we're experiencing isn't great and we need to react differently in order to grow and in order to overcome that challenge that's faced. So neurologically speaking, that's exactly what stress is fundamentally. But why do we experience stress? We experience stress basically because the situation in front of us, we see that situation as being over the limits of our own abilities. We get stressed out because we don't think that we can overcome the challenge in front of us. And like I said at the start of the video, stress basically is initiated when there's a change in our circumstances or we experience something new and different. Let's put this in context. So at work, maybe your boss has given you a new project that you have to manage and you've never actually worked on anything like this before in your life. It's highly likely that you'll experience a level of stress because you've never done this task before. And like I said, all those neurological factors and all those hormones are going to be kicking into your bloodstream in order for you to react quickly and appropriately to this new situation. Now, don't get me wrong, and the way I'm wording this, you can probably tell that a small amount of stress is actually good. Again, let's give an example. So maybe you're walking down the road in the city centre and you see a toddler run out in front of the road. Your stress signals are going to initiate very, very rapidly. All those neurological factors, all those hormones kicking into your bloodstream are going to happen very, very quickly, and it's going to help you react quick enough to maybe grab the toddler or warn somebody. Fundamentally, a small amount of stress can actually be really, really beneficial for us. The same goes for a situation if you're playing sport, for example, and there's a game, a high impact game, maybe a championship game or something like that. The likelihood is that the pressure of the situation, the change in your environment, the change in the actual situation is going to increase your levels of stress, and that stress is actually going to be beneficial for you going forward in your performance levels in that sport. However, this is something that everybody will probably know as well. When stress becomes too much and when we experience stress on a consistent basis, that's when we can really have very, very negative impacts. Emotionally, physically, mentally, we can all have really profound negative implications from stress. Physically, we can have neurological implications. There can be cardiovascular implications. High levels of stress have all been associated with heart disease. So even physically, we can have negative ramifications from too much stress. And a recent study has actually shown that high levels of stress impinge our immune system and actually make us liable to contracting viruses like the common cold and the flu. So high levels of stress can have implications negatively, health-wise, in every part of our lives. So now that we've gone into a little bit of detail as to what stress is neurologically, why we experience stress, maybe times where stress is beneficial and when stress isn't beneficial, why don't we go into the top 3 tips on how best to manage your high levels of stress. So my first tip is to take part in regular activity. Now, in many of my videos on GetPsyched, you'll know that one of my tips more often than not when it comes to things like stress and fear and anxiety is physical activity. And the reason that I go on about this so much is that studies time and time again show the deep correlation between physical activity and reductions in stress, fear, anxiety, depression. The list really does go on. And again, like I normally say, the first thing that you've got to try and do here is to find a time that works for you when taking part in physical activity. Maybe that's before work, maybe that's during your lunch break, maybe that's after work, maybe that's later on in the evening. Whatever works best for you, really do take that time. I would say about an hour a day. Maybe you can't manage that much, but maybe a little less, to focus solely on physical activity. Alongside this, it's also important to think about an activity that you find fun. One of the best things that you can do when conducting physical exercise is to go into something that you really enjoy. There's no point doing physical exercise that you can't be bothered doing or that you hate. Maybe you like going and lifting weights, maybe you like gym classes, maybe you like running. The point here is to invest your time in physical activity and you really will see improvements in your stress levels. Okay, my second tip here is to sleep better. Now, when we're highly stressed, one of the things that can be really implicated negatively is our levels of sleep. And the thing I want to get across here is I'm not saying that you need to sleep more. What I'm saying is that you need to sleep better. Research has shown that negative implications on our stress levels are highly correlated to our levels of sleep. And one of the really negative things about this is that it's a bit of a cycle, it's a bit of a domino effect. What fundamentally happens is that we have poor sleep, we then are increased stress because of that, and because of that stress, we then sleep worse. So this cycle kind of continues. Some of the things that you can do to improve your levels of sleep is to not take your phone into the bedroom. This is one of the main things. More often than not, when people can't sleep, maybe they scroll through their phone or they use their phone as an alarm clock. One of the things that you can do is to buy just a general alarm clock and use that instead. The point being here is don't take your phone into the bedroom. Another thing that you can do is to think about what you're doing 30 minutes before you actually go to bed. If you go to bed at 11 p.m, by 10:30, make sure to turn off the television. Maybe you could do a little bit of reading, maybe you could do some other things. Those electrical impulses, those electrical stimuli that have things like blue light that can really negatively impact your levels of sleep need to be turned off. And if you do that, your levels of sleep will improve. Okay, my third and final tip, and something that I'm really passionate about, is time management. This might be something that sounds really weird to be passionate about, but when I've invested in time management and thinking about the structure of my day, my week, and my month, I've noticed that my levels of stress really do decrease. I've got a lot of things going on. I obviously do the stuff with GetPsyched. I'm doing a doctorate in counseling psychology. I work a couple of jobs and I do placement and I do other things. When I think about all those things combined, my stress levels, I can feel my stress levels increasing. But when I manage my time and I break down my day and I think about the tasks in front of me, I designate time to complete those tasks, my stress levels really do decrease. So my advice here is to maybe keep a daily journal, a daily diary, a weekly and monthly diary as well, to better structure your days out, to manage your time better, to think about the tasks that you've got to do in front of you, and to designate times in the coming weeks and months to actually complete those tasks. So once you write that down, you're going to realize that your levels of stress really do decrease. Okay guys, thanks so much for watching this week's episode of GetPsyched. This week we've been looking at the psychology of stress. We've looked a little bit as to what stress is, what it can do for us, and my top 3 tips on how best to improve your levels of stress. If you've been enjoying the videos, guys, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. You can also like the videos and you can hit that little bell next to the subscribe button and you'll get notifications every Monday of when I upload. Thanks so much for watching and hopefully catch you next week.